Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. So the first and the most relevant abiotic factor is the temperature one, because you know that सबसे ज़्यादा जिससे हम familiar हैं, the seasonal variation, the day and night variation is the temperature only, right? And you know very well that this temperature varies from sub-zero temperatures in polar areas or in mountain areas to a very high, more than 50 degrees Celsius in case of the scorching heat conditions of Rajasthan desert or some desert areas. That means there is a very wide range of temperature conditions, है ना? तो यहाँ पर अगर मैं बात करूँ that जो इक्वेटर से पे अगर आप हो, so if you move from equator to the poles, your temperature will be decreased. Similarly, the temperature will be decreasing when you move from the land areas or the plain areas to the mountain areas or the high altitude regions, right? That means temperature is a kind of abiotic factors which is dependent on the habitat. ठीक है, तो जरूरी नहीं है कि हर जगह सेम टेम्परेचर रहेगा, नहीं. सो वन ऑफ द फैक्टर्स द हैबिटेट, दैट अगर आप इक्वेटर में हो तो चेंज डिफरेंट है, अगर पोलर एरियाज में हो सो डिफरेंट है. एंड द अदर फैक्टर इज इट्स सीजनल वेरिएशंस, है ना, दैट इज ड्यू टू द रिवोल्यूशन एंड रोटेशन ऑफ अर्थ. सो यहाँ पर हमें टेम्परेचर का जो मेन फंक्शनल सिग्निफिकेंस आता है वो क्या आता है, विद दैट द टेम्परेचर इज मेनली कंसर्न्ड विथ the enzyme kinetics. You know very well that enzyme is actually a protein, or more specifically it exists in a tertiary form with its active sites, right? So if you talk about the enzyme kinetics, that means if you increase the temperature more than 37 degrees Celsius, which is the optimum temperature for any kind of enzyme to work, or you exceed this temperature to a very high value, say 50 degrees Celsius or 45 degrees Celsius, then your enzyme will get degraded, है ना? So that you must have studied it in chemistry too, that very high temperature also denatures the enzyme, and a very low temperature will also inhibit the activity of enzyme. That means in both the cases you have enzyme kinetics altered. That means temperature plays a very important role in determining this enzyme kinetics. So how are we concerned with this enzyme kinetics? Obviously, because our whole body is made up of enzyme, our whole body is regulated by millions of enzymes. ठीक है? So if the temperature is depending, or if the temperature has an effect on enzyme kinetics, that means it is regulating at the organism level, right? All the basal it is affecting our basal metabolic rate, activity, right? And other physiological functions. That means temperature in this regard is very important, right? So enzyme kinetics को disturb करता है temperature, या regulate करता है, most appropriate would be that. And it regulates at the organism level. It regulates the basal metabolic rate, the activity part, and other physiological functions is also concerned with the enzyme kinetics part. So that's how the temperature plays a so much important role at the organism level, right? Now if we talk about the different organisms, so some of the organisms will be there which can tolerate or which can live in a very wide range of temperatures. Like they can tolerate a very wide range of temperatures. ठीक है, from 0 degree to high like scorching heat conditions like 50 degrees Celsius, like us. You should be proud of that, right? So we are, or those organisms which bear such wide range of temperatures are known as eurythermal. ठीक है? So eurythermal are those organisms which can tolerate wide range of temperatures. And other one is stenothermal. So stenothermal ones will be those organisms which can live in a very narrow range of temperature. ठीक है? So it can only live in very narrow range. हम लोगों को देखो, we can live in -°C also, माइनस में भी रह सकते हैं एंड +50 48-50 में भी रह सकते हैं. That means we can tolerate such wide range of variations. But some organisms like many fishes, reptiles, they can't. So they migrate. You must have seen or you must have known or heard about this, that many fishes, they move to different areas when seasons change or anything like that, because those conditions are not favorable to them. So yes, they are stenothermal, and those which can bear, they are eurythermal organisms based on this temperature variations tolerance. Also the last point in temperature is that the world's vegetation is divided into 4 classes. ठीक है? So divided into 4 classes on the basis of this temperature variations. ठीक है? So वो 4 classes क्या है? ये आपके NCERT में नहीं given है. So वो 4 classes क्या है? सबसे पहली क्लास है megatherms. Another one is mesotherms. Then you have microtherms. And last one you have hekistotherms. Hekistotherms. ठीक है? So these 4 classes in which the whole world's vegetation is classified into. So the megatherms are those areas or that vegetation where very mainly high temperature persist. ठीक है? So megatherms are those areas where only high temperature persists. और ऐसे areas में आपकी vegetation कैसी होती है? So you have tropical rainforests. ठीक है? तो ये तो हो गया megatherms. ठीक है? Where temperature persists in a very high range. Then if you talk about the mesotherms, here there is high temperature as well as low temperature. So high temperature alternates with low temperature. ठीक है? तो मतलब एक बैलेंस्ड काइंड ऑफ कह सकते हो, दोनों होंगे. सो यहाँ पर कौन से तरह के फॉरेस्ट होते हैं? ऐसे में होते हैं ट्रॉपिकल deciduous forests. ठीक है? So mesotherms will have the tropical deciduous forests, right? Then if you talk about the microtherms, these will be having the lower temperature conditions. ठीक है? So significant low temperatures will be observed in microtherms, and in these the type of vegetation you will be seeing as coniferous forests. So you will be seeing coniferous ones, right? And in hekistotherms, you have very low temperatures, like extremely low temperatures. ठीक है? So यहाँ पर you have very low temperatures, और यहाँ पर आपको याद करो वो ग्राफ, सबसे नीचे -°C में कौन सी वेजिटेशन थी? टुंड्रा. So यहाँ पर आर्कटिक एंड अल्पाइन टुंड्रा आएगा. ठीक है? So these are the world's vegetation divided into 4 classes, right? So the next abiotic factor is water. As you know that water is so important for each and every living organism. That means that you know that the life also on earth first time originated in water only. That means it is a universal solvent and each and every organism has to have it, है ना? सो सबसे पहली चीज तो यहाँ पर ये देखनी है यहाँ पर कि जो ड्राई एरियाज में प्लांट्स हैं जिनको हम जीरोफाइट्स बोलते हैं. सो जीरोफाइट्स आर दोज प्लांट्स which are found in desert conditions where water stress is very prevalent, जहाँ पानी नहीं है. So how do they live? सो यहाँ पर भी बड़े तरह के अडेप्टेशंस देखने को मिलते हैं. दे अडेप्ट बिकॉज उनके पास चांस नहीं है ना कि वो ह्यूमंस की तरह चल के चले जाएं दूसरी जगह, नहीं, तो उन्हें वहीं रहना है. So that means they have to adapt to those conditions. So वो adaptation many types की हो सकती है. That we have ephemerals, we have succulents, we have non-succulents. Ephemerals जो होते हैं वो avoid करते हैं, उनको हम बोलते हैं कि they escape the drought. So they are drought escapers. तो वो dry conditions आने से पहले, summers आने से पहले वो अपनी life cycle complete कर लेंगे और वो एक seed की तरह persist करेंगे. Then you have succulents. Succulents क्या करेंगे? They will store water by a particular mechanism. ठीक है, which will be used in that particular dry condition. And the last one is non-succulents. Non-succulents क्या होते हैं कि that they are they literally experiences both the dryness in external as well as internal environment. So they are the only species which are true xerophytes. So true xerophytes means that they bear dryness internally also and externally also. That means they do not escape the dry condition. That means they do not avoid the condition. They literally bear the conditions internally as well as externally. ठीक है, so they are also known as true xerophyte. So if you see that water is very important. ठीक है, तो यहाँ पर हमारे पास वाटर में मेन चीज क्या आती है? आप लोग सोचते होंगे कि जो लोग एक्वेटिक ऑर्गेनिजम्स हैं उन्हें तो कोई दिक्कत ही नहीं होती होगी, उनके पास तो पानी ही पानी है, तो कभी वाटर स्ट्रेस होता ही नहीं होगा डेवलप. बट ऐसा नहीं है. जो एक्वेटिक ऑर्गेनिजम्स होते हैं, सो फॉर एक्वेटिक ऑर्गेनिजम्स what matters is the quality of water. What do you mean by quality of water? That means its composition, its chemical composition, how much oxygen is dissolved, how much pH is there, how much temperature is there. That means जरूरी नहीं है कि अगर आपके पास अभी तो 70% पानी है ना दुनिया में, बट आप सब पी नहीं सकते हो ना. पीने वाला कितना है? Only some 0.0%, right? 0.01% or maybe less. That means जितना पानी दिखता है वो सब यूजफुल नहीं है. द क्वालिटी ऑफ वाटर शुड ऑल्सो बी गुड, तभी वो उनके यूज का है, वरना नहीं. सो फॉर एक्वेटिक ऑर्गेनिज्म व्हाट मैटर्स इज द क्वालिटी ऑफ वाटर. अदरवाइज we are more concerned with the salt conditions in water, which normally affects the particular habitat or the organisms living in that particular habitat. That means we should measure the salinity, which is actually the salt conditions. ठीक है, so we measure salinity in terms of parts per million, ppm. ठीक है, so we measure salinity in terms of ppm. So you have 3 examples. So if it is less than 5 ppm, then it is inland waters actually. And in case of sea conditions, the salinity range varies from 30 to 35 ppm, right? And in case of hypersaline lagoons, name itself suggests hypersaline, high salt condition. So hypersaline lagoons के केस में you will have the salinity more than 100 ppm. You can imagine how much saline condition is there in hypersaline lagoons, right? So these are the different salinity levels or the conditions which you see in inland waters, seas, and in case of the hypersaline lagoons. So यहाँ पर हमारे पास ये 3 मेन चीजें आती हैं. Then you say similarly जो टेम्परेचर में हुए थे यूरीथर्मल एंड स्टीनोथर्मल, यहाँ पर क्या होता है? यूरीहेलाइन वर्सेस स्टीनोहेलाइन. यूरीहेलाइन वर्सेस स्टीनोहेलाइन. दैट मीन्स यहाँ पर जो यूरीहेलाइन है दैट बियर्स अ वाइड रेंज ऑफ सॉल्ट कंडीशंस, एंड स्टीनोहेलाइन जो है दैट has a narrow range of salt condition. That means euryhaline versus stenohaline is same as eurythermal versus stenothermal. Also, कई बार क्वेश्चन आ जाता है that if you transfer the फ्रेश वाटर फिश इनटू हाई सॉल्ट कंडीशंस, तो वहां पर दिक्कत आएगी. सिमिलरली अगर आप किसी हाई सॉल्ट कंडीशन में रहने वाली फिश को आप अगर फ्रेश वाटर में ट्रांसफर करोगे तो वहां पर भी दिक्कत आएगी, बिकॉज ऑफ द ऑस्मोलारिटी लेवल चेंज. ऑस्मोलारिटी इतना ज्यादा डिफरेंस बियर नहीं कर सकती है, इतना ज्यादा चेंज बियर नहीं कर सकती. सो ऑस्मोलारिटी लेवल अगर इतना एक्सटेंट में चेंज होगा, so obviously fish will have a detrimental effect. Many a times fish also does not survive, right? So the next abiotic factor is the light. So the third factor is light. So what is actually light? Light is an electromagnetic radiation, right? But for us, when we use this term light, so for us light means, what we mean is the visible light which the human's eyes can see. So यहाँ पर याद रखना है कि light is nothing, it's just an electromagnetic radiation, and the visible light is the part of this electromagnetic spectrum whose wavelength lies between 400 to 700 nanometers. So now I will tell you one way of remembering these, in a serial wise increasing wavelengths or increasing frequencies. So the complete electromagnetic spectrum. So it goes like this. Reading mathematics is very useful except geometry. ठीक है? तो reading, so read R for radio waves. Mathematics, so microwaves. I for infrared. So reading mathematics is very. V for visible light. U for UV rays. So reading mathematics is very useful except, so here I have deliberately written except with not, with starting with not E, instead I have used X because X का ही use है हमें. So X means X rays, and finally G means gamma rays or gamma radiations. So radio waves, microwaves, infrared, visible light, UV rays, X rays, gamma rays. ठीक है? So this is in the order of, which order is this? तो याद रखोगे, देखो विजिबल लाइट का मैंने अभी बताया रेंज क्या होता है. सो विजिबल लाइट का मैं याद करने का तरीका बता रही हूँ. सो विजिबल लाइट का रेंज होता है 400 to 700 नैनोमीटर. और याद रखना यूवी रेज जो होता है ना, दैट लाइज बिटवीन 10 नैनोमीटर टू 400 नैनोमीटर. अब आप खुद बताओ. Obviously UV rays has lower wavelength range than this. तो यहाँ पर अगर हम इस डायरेक्शन में जा रहे हैं, so UV rays will be having lower wavelength. That means ये जो order है, this is of decreasing wavelength, but increasing frequency, right? So अगर ये याद रखने का तरीका है that if you are using this format, obviously यही याद रख सकते हैं. So अगर इस तरह से याद कर रहे हो तो याद रखोगे कि this you are going in the direction of decreasing wavelength and increasing frequency, right? So now visible light 400 to 700 nanometer, UV rays are 10 nanometer to 400 nanometer, whereas infrared has more higher wavelength, more wavelength or higher wavelength than the visible light, right? तो अब हम इंटरेस्टेड हैं थोड़ा सा यूवी रेज में. ठीक है? तो यूवी रेज जो होते हैं ना, उसमें 3 टाइप के रेज हो सकती हैं, यूवीसी, यूवीबी एंड यूवीए. ठीक है? यूवीसी जो होती है ना, इसकी वेवलेंथ, दीज ऑल 3 डिफर इन द रेंजेस ऑफ वेवलेंथ. ठीक है? तो सबसे लोएस्ट वेवलेंथ होती है यूवीसी की, विच लाइज बिटवीन 100 नैनोमीटर टू 280 नैनोमीटर. ठीक है? उससे ज्यादा होती है यूवीबी की, विच लाइज फ्रॉम 280 टू 320 नैनोमीटर. एंड सबसे हाईएस्ट वेवलेंथ होती है यूवीए की, विच लाइज फ्रॉम 320 टू 400 नैनोमीटर. तो क्या पता चलता है इससे? देयर आर 3 डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ, मतलब विद इन दैट यूवी वी हैव 3 डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ यूवी रेज with different wavelength range. So we have UVC, UVB and UVA. UVA, you have to remember, has the largest wavelength and UVC has the shortest wavelength. ठीक है? Now the question comes, which is the most dangerous of all these? So you have to remember UVC is the most dangerous one because it is highly carcinogenic, it is highly cancerous, mutagenic. वैसे तो देखो UV rays in total it is mutagenic in nature, right? But if you talk about in a comparative way कि इसमें से सबसे ज़्यादा कौन सी harmful है, so obviously UVC, right? Even हमारा ozone layer जो है, it absorbs almost all this UVC and some of this UVB, right? So very less UVC is penetrated through the ozone. Otherwise it has a shorter wavelength, so it can't penetrate the ozone layer, so it is absorbed by that ozone layer. So almost all part almost, ठीक है, because अभी क्या हो रहा है, ओजोन डिप्लेशन हो रहा है, जिसकी वजह से हमारी बहुत सारी ऐसी हार्मफुल रेडिएशंस लाइक यूवीसी स्टार्टेड टू पेनिट्रेट. तो अब क्या हो रहा है कि इजीली पेनिट्रेट कर जाती है एंड इसीलिए हम इतना प्रोन टू कैंसर्स एंड सेवरल डिजीजेस हो गए हैं. When we talk about light or sunlight, we usually refer it to the solar energy, that is sunlight, right? So the main source of light on this earth is sun. तो यहाँ पर हमें क्या देखना होता है, जैसे फॉर एग्जाम्पल that this particular factor varies with latitude. So it has a latitudinal patterning. For example, अगर आप इक्वेटर पे हो तो maximum solar energy is received at the equator or near to the areas of equator like tropics mainly, right? But when you go to temperate areas and polar areas or latitudes, so you will find that the solar energy is in more dispersed form. Because होता क्या है, अगर मैं आपको एक rough diagram बनाकर दिखाऊं, so if this is earth, ठीक है, so यहाँ पर अगर हमारा सन है, so मान लो कि यहाँ से हीट एनर्जी इज कमिंग, तो सबसे ज्यादा कहाँ पर आएगी, यहाँ पर बिल्कुल सीधी है ना, तो सबसे ज्यादा कॉन्सेंट्रेशन विल बी एट द इक्वेटर, तो इसीलिए यहाँ पर सबसे ज्यादा सोलर एनर्जी आएगी, राइट? बट व्हेन यू गो और व्हेन यू मूव फ्रॉम इक्वेटर टुवर्ड्स पोल्स, तो अब कैसे आएगी, इट विल स्टार्ट interacting with the angular formats. तो क्या हो रहा है, अब आप देख रहे हो ना, यहां से एनर्जी अब डिसिपेट हो रही है, डायरेक्ट नहीं पड़ रही है, अब डिसिपेट हो रही है स्मॉलर. तो जितना स्मॉलर एंगल पे ये डिसिपेट होगी, जितना छोटे छोटे एंगल पे ये डिसिपेट होगी, ट्रॉपिक्स के पास विच इज नियर टू इक्वेटर, वहां पर अच्छी खासी सनलाइट मिलेगी, राइट? अच्छा खासा फोटो पीरियड होगा, अमाउंट ऑफ लाइट विल ऑल्सो बी गुड. बट वेन यू मूव टुवर्ड्स इक्वेटर, तो उतना ही ज्यादा लार्जर एंगल से डिसिपेशन होगा सनलाइट का, एंड दैट इज द रीजन व्हाई दे हैव लेस पोटेंशियल ऑफ यूटिलाइजेशन, लेस पोटेंशियल ऑफ यूटिलाइजिंग सोलर एनर्जी, बिकॉज वहां पर है ही नहीं इतनी ज्यादा एनर्जी, है ना? If we talk about light with respect to the effect on plants, so you need to have you need to talk about the 3 main parameters. What are they? So they are, first, the quality of light. How do you relate the quality of light? So we will relate it with the wavelength or color, ठीक है? Then the quantity of light. So quantity means you will be relating it with the intensity of light, right? And the last one is the duration of light. So duration is also known as photoperiod. Fine. So these 3 are the main parameters which affect plants as well as animals. So when we talk about the quality of light, so अभी हमने बात की that wavelength matters. So the blue and red wavelengths are the ones which promote photosynthesis, or it is the wavelength range where photosynthesis occurs, right? Now, normally in terrestrial ecosystem, this is not a limiting factor, but it is a limiting factor in aquatic ecosystem. The reason being that most of this blue and red part of the light gets absorbed, okay, and it can't penetrate deeply inside the water bodies. So it poses a great problem for the deep living species in the water. Fine. So this is one thing, and also quality is regulating both. It is regulating photosynthesis also and also photomorphogenesis. That means, for example, examples of photomorphogenesis means flower induction, right? Seed germination, etc. So these are all examples of photomorphogenesis. So it plays a very important role in deciding the developmental process, starting from the seed germination to the flower induction or the growth and development of the plant. Fine. So this is very important. Then if you talk about the quantity part, so quantity is related with the intensity. And that I have told you just now, that intensity varies through three factors. First of all, latitudinal change, right? बताया अभी जो higher altitudes होंगे, they will experience much lesser intensity light than the plain areas, right? Because they will have a more dispersed sunlight. So second factor is time of the day. किस टाइम पर आप दिन के देख रहे हो, है ना? इंटेंसिटी ऑब्वियसली शाम को देखो, 4 बजे की धूप देखोगे और 2 बजे या 12 बजे की धूप देखोगे, इंटेंसिटी में फर्क मिलेगा. So time of the day also matters. And the third variation is season of the year. भाई कौन सा सीजन है ना? तो ये तीन चीजें जो हैं, latitude, time of the day and season or seasonal variations decides the intensity. ठीक है? They are the main three factors which affects the intensity. And how intensity is responsible? So it is responsible for growth and reproduction as well as in photosynthesis of the plant. Fine. Also based on this intensity, we can also classify plants into shade tolerant plants and shade intolerant plants. Okay? So which can live properly in shady areas, they are shade tolerant, and which can't live much longer in the shady area without sunlight, they are known as shady intolerant plants, right? The last one is duration of the photoperiod. So duration is related with the photoperiod, that the period in which sunlight is present. Fine. So duration is important for phenological processes. ठीक है? So it is very important, and it is also very important cue for the animals that I have told you earlier. So what are these phenological processes? Phenological processes means flowering and fruiting. ठीक है? So flowering and fruiting are the phenological processes which are regulated by this photoperiod. ठीक है? So this photoperiod, अगर आपको लाइट सेंस करनी है तो कुछ ना कुछ रिसेप्टर्स होने चाहिए. सो प्लांट्स हैव फोटो रिसेप्टर्स लाइक साइटोक्रोम, ठीक है, सॉरी क्रिप्टोक्रोम एंड फाइटोक्रोम. सो यू हैव टू टाइप्स ऑफ फोटो रिसेप्टर्स. यू हैव क्रिप्टोक्रोम एंड फाइटोक्रोम, which are the photoreceptors present in the plants to sense this photoperiod and regulate their growth and developmental processes. So I guess that's all for today. In the next class we'll be talking about other two abiotic factors, the soil and atmosphere. Fine. And then we'll be talking about the response to these abiotic factors. Fine. So that's all for today.